My sister laughed as she tossed my gift into the trash can right in front of the board members. "I hope this little doodle helps you pay your rent, loser," she sneered. She had no clue that this trash was an original worth $45,000. But the real shock came 3 days later, when my lawyer served them with a lawsuit, and their multi-million-dollar company began to crumble because of their own greed. I was 27, standing beneath the sprawling crystal chandeliers of my father's anniversary gala, my fingers white-knuckled around a portfolio case worth $45,000. It was my heart rendered in charcoal, a study I had spent weeks perfecting as a tribute to him. "Happy anniversary, Dad," I said, extending the gift and bracing for a smile. Instead, my sister Lily swirled her champagne, her laughter ringing out loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding board members. "How sweet, Clara. Is that from a mindfulness coloring book? We could probably hang it in the service corridor." My father chuckled. I didn't cry and I didn't scream. I simply took my $45,000 back and walked away. The elevator doors slid shut, severing the sound of their mockery like a blade. The silence that followed was pressurized, heavy with the electric tension that precedes a mountain storm. I watched the floor numbers count down from 30. Beside me, Mark loosened his silk tie. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He knew exactly what that portfolio contained. He knew the charcoal sketch wasn't a mere hobbyist's doodle, it was study number 4 for my upcoming series, slated to headline a major contemporary auction next month. The opening bid was set at $45,000. "Are you all right?" he asked softly as we reached the lobby. "I'm not sad, Mark," I said, stepping out into the crisp Colorado night. "I'm calculating." We didn't return to the apartment. We drove straight to my studio in the industrial district of Denver. The moment I threw the heavy steel bolt, the atmosphere shifted. The penthouse had smelled of sterile lilies and expensive, hollow perfume. Here, the air was thick with the scent of turpentine, linseed oil, and cold coffee. It smelled of labor. It smelled of the truth. I walked past the large canvases shrouded in drop cloths and sat at my desk. The glow of the laptop illuminated the dust motes dancing in the dark. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" Mark asked, leaning against the doorframe. I navigated to a folder titled Family. Inside was a single document, a licensing agreement I had spent weeks drafting with my intellectual property lawyer. My father's firm, Sterling Developments, was hemorrhaging relevance, desperate to pivot toward a younger, more sophisticated demographic. For months, Lily had been boasting about her attempts to secure the rights to use imagery from the elusive artist known as Lyra for their new brand identity. They had no idea that Lyra was the very sister they mocked for being a shiftless dreamer. This contract was supposed to be my olive branch, a gift, an exclusive, perpetual license to use my work for their rebranding, free of charge. It would have saved them hundreds of thousands in fees, and likely salvaged their reputation. I looked at the file name. I thought about the years I had spent painting in the dark, terrified to make a sound while Lily took important calls in the rooms above. I thought about my mother's performative sighs, telling guests I was still finding myself, as if I were a lost child rather than a woman building an empire in the shadows. They hadn't just rejected a drawing. They had rejected their own survival. They wanted a titan in the family, I whispered. Fine. I'll show them how a professional handles a toxic investment. I dragged the file to the trash. With a steady, rhythmic tap, I emptied it. Deleted? Mark asked. Irretrievably. I picked up my phone. I didn't send a scathing text or demand an apology. I simply opened my contacts and found the entries for my father, my mother, and Lily. One by one, I blocked them. It wasn't an act of spite, it was a professional necessity. I had an auction to prepare for, and I could no longer afford the distraction of people who couldn't afford me. I stared at the list of blocked names. It felt like an amputation, yet it felt like relief. People often wonder why I stayed so long, why I kept showing up to the curated dinners and the galas where I was treated as a decorative failure. The answer was woven into the fabric of my upbringing. In the Sterling household, money wasn't just currency. It was the only metric of love. It was attention. It was worth. And by that standard, I had been bankrupt before I ever began. I remember when Lily went to university. She was barely scraping a C average in business administration, spending 4 nights a week at bars, yet my parents treated her like a rising mogul. They bought her the latest high-end laptop, hired private tutors at $100 an hour, and funded a lavish networking semester in London. They called it investing in the future. I was studying fine arts on a partial scholarship I had earned myself. When I needed supplies, I didn't bother asking for help. I already knew the script. Art is a charming pastime, Clara, they would say. But we aren't in the business of throwing good money after bad. So I scavenged. I bought used brushes at estate sales, scrubbing dried acrylic from the bristles with harsh solvents until my hands were raw and bleeding. I painted on discarded plywood I found in alleyways behind construction sites. They didn't see resilience in my stained fingers, they saw desperation. And the most twisted part was that they relished it. It took me years to understand the mechanics of their cruelty. For a long time, I believed they simply hated me. But hate is active, hate requires an expenditure of energy. This was something far more insidious. It was the trap of normalized contempt. My parents and Lily didn't hate me, they needed me. They required a failure to make their own mediocre successes seem brilliant by comparison. Every time they sighed and handed me a $50 check for groceries, or rolled their eyes at my paint-splattered jeans, they felt a surge of superiority. My struggle was the foundation upon which their egos were built. If I was the starving artist, they were the magnanimous patrons. If I succeeded, if I was actually a talent to be reckoned with, their entire narrative would collapse. Lily would be revealed as nothing more than a spoiled child with a title she hadn't earned, and my father would be reduced to a checkbook with a pulse. They loved the version of me that was small. So I became Lyra. Lyra wasn't just a pseudonym, she was a fortress. I created her 5 years ago after my first solo gallery opening. It was a tiny, underground show in a basement in a quiet corner of the city. I had invited them 3 months in advance. I reminded them weekly. That night, I stood by the door for 4 hours, watching every face that walked in. They never showed. The next morning, I saw the photos online. They had gone out for an extravagant steak dinner to celebrate Lily being named Employee of the Month at the family firm. That night, Clara the daughter died. Lyra was born. I began signing my work with that name, a single, sharp word, because I knew they would never look for it. They would never look for success where they had already decided there was only failure. I kept Lyra a secret not to hide my shame, but to protect my joy. I built a career, a reputation, and a fortune in the shadows, letting them believe I was still the girl who needed their pity. But tonight, the pity had run out. I looked around my studio. The pieces for the new series leaned against the walls, dark and luminous, humming with a quiet power. These canvases were worth more than their penthouse, more than their hollow approval. I wasn't the investment that failed, I was the asset they were too arrogant to value. My phone didn't stop buzzing for an hour. I ignored it, focusing on the texture of the canvas in front of me, but the notifications piled up like dead leaves. Finally, I flipped the screen over. It was a stream of venom from Lily. Nice exit, drama queen. Dad is furious. We threw that drawing in the recycling bin. Don't worry, we didn't want your sketches cluttering up the office anyway. Grow up, Clara. You ruined the evening. I didn't feel the old, sharp sting of rejection. I felt the cool detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. I was about to set the phone aside when Mark walked up behind me, holding his tablet. His face was lit by the blue glow of the screen, and he wore a tight, satisfied smile. I couldn't help myself, he said. What did you do? Check her social media feed. I opened the app. Lily had posted a video of my sketch, my study number 4, propped up next to a half-eaten plate of appetizers. She had added a laughing emoji and a caption, "When your unemployed sister tries to pay rent with doodles. #starving artist #fail." But the post itself wasn't what mattered. It was the comment section. Mark, using his verified account, the one he used for appraising high-end assets for venture capital firms, had left a single, clinical comment. Provenance: original charcoal study by contemporary artist Clara. Confirmed authentic. Current estimated auction value, $45,000. Please handle with care. I looked at Mark. You just lit a match in a gas station. They needed better lighting, he replied. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 minutes. That was the time it took for Lily to read the notification, click on Mark's profile, see his credentials, and then type Lyra Artist into a search engine. It was 3 minutes of absolute peace before the war began. My phone lit up. Lily was calling. I answered on the second ring and put it on speaker. I didn't say hello. I just listened to the ragged, uneven sound of her breathing. You liar, she hissed. Her voice wasn't apologetic or shocked. It was trembling with a greedy, self-righteous fury. You manipulative little liar. Hello, Lily, I said calmly. I see the catalog, she shouted. I'm looking at the auction house website right now. Lyra. That's you. You're Lyra. Yes. And this doodle is worth $45,000. Conservatively. Yes. I expected a moment of silence, perhaps a flash of realization that she had just tossed a fortune into the recycling bin. But I had underestimated the depths of my sister's entitlement. She didn't gasp in horror, she pivoted instantly to a sense of ownership. You've been holding out on us. She screamed. All this time you've been playing the martyr, letting Mom and Dad pay for dinner when they visited, while you were sitting on millions. Do you have any idea how sick that is? I never asked for their money, Lily. I refused it. You hid assets. She yelled, reaching for business terminology she barely understood. You are part of this family. That means your success is our success. We supported you while you played artist in the basement. We tolerated your little hobby. That makes us investors. I looked at the phone, visualizing her face, the vein throbbing in her forehead, the shark-like glint in her eyes. So you want the sketch back? I asked. The sketch. She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. No, Clara, I want my cut. You're going to sign over the rights to that artwork for the company branding just like you planned. And then we're going to talk about back pay for the years we supported you. You don't get to become a millionaire on our watch and leave us behind. She didn't see a sister. She saw a lottery ticket she had forgotten to cash. I wasn't hiding, Lily, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I was protecting myself. And you just confirmed exactly why. I hung up. The screen went black, but the air in the studio felt electric. The secret was out. The disguise was gone. They knew what I was worth, and now they were coming to collect. I placed the phone face down on the desk. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was the quiet of a sniper adjusting their scope. Lily wanted a war. She wanted to drag me into the mud, to make me scream and cry and play the victim until I exhausted myself trying to prove I was good enough. That was the old dynamic, they created chaos, and I paid the emotional tax to fix it. But I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a business entity, and they had just threatened my assets. She thinks she's negotiating, I told Mark. She thinks this is a family squabble. What is it? He asked. A hostile takeover attempt. I didn't text back. I didn't engage. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and searched for Blackwood and Thorne. They were the most aggressive intellectual property firm in the state. Their retainer was $5,000. I paid it without blinking. 30 minutes later, I was on a video call with a senior partner. I didn't tell him about the holiday snubs or the childhood trauma. I spoke in facts. My name is Clara Sterling, professionally known as Lyra. My father's company, Sterling Developments, is currently using branding materials, specifically their logo, website headers, and marketing font packages, that were created by me 5 years ago. The lawyer nodded. Did you sign a transfer of copyright? No. I did it as a favor. There was no contract, no payment. And now, I am revoking their license to use my intellectual property, effective immediately. It sounded cold. It was. But I remembered the day I designed that logo. I was 22, working on a laptop that overheated if I used it for more than an hour. My father had looked at the final design and said, "It's fine. It'll save us hiring a real professional." He had built his brand on my free labor. Now he was going to learn the true cost of a professional. Draft the cease and desist, I said. They have 48 hours to scrub my work from their physical and digital assets. If they miss the deadline, we sue for retroactive licensing fees at current market rates. Understood, the lawyer said. Anything else? Yes. I walked over to the storage closet in the back of the studio and pulled out a dusty cardboard box labeled returns. Inside were the gifts I'd tried to give them for years, small paintings, sketches, hand-painted silk scarves. Every single one had been returned with a polite grimace, or simply abandoned at restaurants. We don't have room for this clutter, Clara, my mother had said last Christmas, handing back a small oil painting of the local skyline. I pulled that painting out now and flipped it over. It was signed Lyra. I have a collection of my early work, I told the attorney. The provenance is clean. I am consigning them tomorrow. We'll title the catalog The Discarded Series. I wasn't just selling art, I was monetizing their apathy. The following afternoon, my lawyer sent an email with no subject line, marked only with a high-priority flag. Attached was a document titled Project Horizon, a confidential investor pitch deck. Sterling Developments wasn't just rebranding, they were insolvent. The deck was a desperate, 11th-hour attempt to secure $10 million from private equity. Slide 12 stopped my heart. My artwork, study number 4, the very sketch they had claimed to throw in the bin, was displayed as the new face of the corporation. Worse still, the appendix contained a contract granting the firm 10 years of exclusive commercial rights to the entire Lyra catalog. It was signed with my name, a clumsy forgery clearly lifted from an old birthday card. This is criminal, the lawyer said over the phone. Wire fraud, identity theft. If this goes to the prosecutors, they are looking at significant prison time. Mark went pale as he scrolled through the deck on his own device. Apex Capital is my primary client. I know their managing partner personally. They hadn't just stolen my work, they had pitched a lie to the very people my partner represented. They bet on my silence, I said. They bet I would never be in the room where these deals happen. 2 hours later, my parents stormed into my studio, their faces etched with a frantic, wild-eyed desperation. The deal had collapsed. Apex had demanded an immediate audit the moment Mark raised the alarm. My mother grabbed my shoulders, her voice a shrill, piercing edge. It's family, Clara. She screamed. Do you want to see us ruined? You have to sign this. She shoved a backdated addendum toward me. Standing there, surrounded by my work, I finally saw them for what they were. They weren't powerful or terrifying. They were small. Their entire identity wasn't built on character, It was built on a crumbling line of credit. I can't sign that, I said. Why not? My father demanded, his voice shaking. Because I've already handed the original sketch and the forged documents over to the authorities. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and brittle. 3 days later, Sterling Developments filed for bankruptcy. 6 months after that, I stood in a quiet, high-ceilinged gallery in Memphis. Study number 4 hung on the center wall. A small red dot beside the frame marked it as sold. The proceeds had already been used to establish a full-ride scholarship for underprivileged art students in the city. I stepped to the microphone as the room fell silent. They told me my difference was a defect, I said to the crowd. They were wrong. Your difference is your currency. Your rejection is your fuel. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. My name is Clara, I said. And I am Lyra. I turned back to a fresh, white canvas and dipped my brush into a pool of shimmering gold. I had a new life to paint.